All right, let's talk about something absolutely essential for anyone who's dealing with the law, the IRAC method. Specifically, we're going to zoom in on that critical second letter, the R, for rule.
So, you get handed this complex legal problem, right? It's just a wall of text, a dense fact pattern packed with all these details, and you're supposed to figure out what it all means legally. It can feel, well, completely overwhelming. Like you're trying to find a path through a forest, but where do you even begin? You know, a really good way to think about this is like a puzzle. The key to solving any puzzle, of course, is finding the right pieces and figuring out how they all connect. And when it comes to legal analysis, that rule, well, that's your foundational corner piece. It's the one you absolutely have to find first to make sense of everything else.
All right, so let's get right into it. How do you find that crucial first piece of the puzzle? Let's talk about identifying the correct legal rule.
So what is this rule we're talking about? Put simply, it's just the law that applies to the legal issues in your problem. That's it. It's not something you make up on the spot. It's something you have to go find. You got to dig through your study materials, hunt for those specific cases and statutes that actually govern the situation you're looking at.
And the whole point here, the big goal, is to lay out the legal framework before you even touch the specific facts of your case. Think of it like this. You're laying out your entire toolkit on the table, all the established principles you're going to need, before you start working on the problem.
Okay, so finding the rule is half the battle. But what's really interesting, and this is where so many people stumble, is how you actually state it. Getting this part right is where you really start to show your legal chops.
And this quote, this just nails it. You state the rule as a general principle, not a conclusion. What does that mean? It means you are not supposed to give away your answer yet. All you're doing is stating the law, plain and simple, totally neutral, totally objective. Almost like you're a teacher explaining a concept to a class before you get to the specific example.
This slide shows it perfectly. Just look at the difference. On the left, you've got the correct way, a clean, general statement of the law. Consideration must be a value in the eyes of the law. That's it. Now look at the right. The contract is binding because, whoa, hold on. That's a conclusion. You've totally jumped the gun and skipped the most important part of the process. Stating the general principle first isn't just a nice idea. It's the only way you can build a logical, sound argument.
So why is this such a big deal? Well, because it forces you to be methodical. When you lay out the rule clearly at the very beginning, you're basically drawing a logical roadmap for your entire analysis. It stops you from just jumping to a conclusion without actually, showing your work. Okay, let's make this real. Let's walk through a classic example from contract law to see exactly how this works in practice.
So imagine this is your legal issue. Was the contract binding if there was no consideration? Now, it feels like a simple yes or no question, doesn't it? But you can't just blurt out an answer. You have to build your case, and that starts by laying down the rules that tell us what makes a contract binding in the first place.
So how do you actually do this? You layer the rules strategically. Look at step 1. You start broad. You state the big general rule. A binding contract needs an offer, acceptance, and consideration. Simple enough. Then, step 2, you zoom in. You focus on the part of the rule that's actually in question, in this case, consideration, and you bring in a more specific rule, maybe from a famous case like Thomas v. Thomas. And check out step 3. You also have to acknowledge other related rules. It's not about finding one magic bullet rule. It's about building up a whole legal picture that shows you understand the entire landscape. And that's because, let's be real, it's almost never just about one single rule. The real skill here is in synthesizing multiple principles together. You're weaving together the broad ideas from statutes with the nitty-gritty details from case law to create a complete picture. Your rules section shouldn't just be a random list. It should be a carefully built foundation that shows how all these different legal gears mesh together.
Okay, so we've covered the what and the how, but let's talk about the why. Why is getting this one single step right so incredibly important? And I'm not just talking about for an exam, I mean for your entire career in the law.
Honestly, mastering this step is, well, it's everything. It's what takes you from being totally lost and confused to having real clarity. It's the key that unlocks the correct way to analyze the facts. It keeps your whole argument on track, makes sure you reach a solid conclusion, and frankly, it shows you have a crucial professional skill.
And here's the bottom line. Getting the rule right is what separates just guessing an answer from conducting a professional legal analysis. It is the absolute foundation of your entire argument. If that foundation is shaky, the whole thing just crumbles.
So, you get it. You now know what the rule is and why it's so important. But that brings up the real question, doesn't it? You've laid out your legal toolkit perfectly, but how do you actually apply it to the facts of the case? How do you use those tools? Well, that's where the next letter comes in, the A, for application, and that's exactly what we'll tackle next time.